In today's video, we're going to have a guest over who is going to tell us about her journey from investment banking to tech. So our guest today is Maariya, who currently works at Uber as a chief of staff. She was previously at JP Morgan working as an investment banker. We're going to learn about some of the things that she did in school and how she built her portfolio to help her get to where she is today. Maariya, welcome to my YouTube channel. How's your day going?
Good. Thank you for having me, Sundas. I am super excited to be here today to talk to you all about my journey from first medicine to investment banking to tech, and talking through how I made those pivots in school, both high school and college, and also what I did early in my career to be able to make transitions through very different industries. Excited to have the conversation today.
Could you tell everybody about your career journey and tell us a little bit more about you so we can get to know you better?
So my career journey really started, I would say, in college. I came in as pre-med. For many of you who are familiar with Desi culture, brown parents, really growing up, I had three options. It was become a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, and there was nothing else in between. So I really had no idea what the, quote, business industry looked like, what tech even was. So I started my college journey as a neuroscience major, and I was studying medical, like pre-medicine, and doing all of my pre-medical requirements. And about halfway through college, I decided that medicine just wasn't for me. I really enjoyed the people aspect of work, like collaborative working environments, fast-paced working environments. And I actually enjoyed the business side of healthcare more than I enjoyed the OChem that I was in, for example, and the research that I was doing on the side. All of the requirements to get into medical school weren't as interesting to me. And so I decided to make a change, much to the dismay of my parents. I decided to pursue a career in business. And so I didn't actually know what that entailed. What I did to start with, and this is the first piece of advice that I would give, is I went to my career center at college. So most universities in the United States have a career center. And at that career center, I just went and I signed up for their monthly newsletter or weekly newsletter, and just asked for industry updates for all industries. I didn't limit my search. I just said, sign me up and share as much information as possible. So I started to receive newsletters with job opportunities, mostly internship opportunities, because I was only halfway through college at that time. And that's where I really first heard about all the opportunities within finance. And so my first dip was actually an internship at JP Morgan through a program called Launching Leaders. And I went through that interview process and received an offer to work at JP Morgan as an intern in the summer. And so I went to New York for the first time ever and did that internship. And then from there, it was just really a return offer that led to a full-time offer. And I started my career as an investment banking analyst in the healthcare industry at JP Morgan. And then I spent a few years there and then transitioned to tech.
That is amazing. Thank you for sharing that. My follow-up question for you. So you currently work at Uber. You are chief of staff. So could you tell us how you made that transition from investment banking, working at JP Morgan, to ending up in tech at one of the biggest tech companies?
Yeah, I'd love to. So as I create content, this is the number one question that I get. How do you actually pivot industries? How did you go from finance to tech without any experience, which was my case? And I will say a few things. So while I was working in finance, I really paid attention to the parts of my job that I enjoyed and didn't enjoy, because in a week to week, there is such a different number of activities that I did in my finance job. And there were parts of it that I really enjoyed and parts of it that I really did not enjoy. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with investment banking, essentially 80% of the job is what people think about immediately. It's the Wolf of Wall Street type work, which is like deal modeling, deal execution, very finance heavy. And then 20% of the job, which no one usually talks about, is actually growth strategy. So my job was when companies would come to JP Morgan to go public or raise capital, they don't just do that immediately. You go through about a year process where you're trying to set that company up for success. Like you're working on their growth strategy, how they increase their rev share, all of these interesting, more like consulting type opportunities, strategy type work. And so I really did enjoy that 20%. So when I was then looking for my next career after investment banking, most of my colleagues actually just stayed in finance. But I realized that if I didn't enjoy that 80% of my job, I would definitely not enjoy a hedge fund or a private equity shop. So I focused on that 20% and realized by talking to people within my college network. So that's another ding, ding, ding tip is when you're looking for new opportunities, go on LinkedIn, type in your alumni network and see if you can do informational coffee chats with someone who is at a job or a career or a company that you really enjoy. So I actually started talking to an acquaintance friend of mine who worked at Uber at the time and asked her more about her role. And it sounded exactly like what I was looking for. It was a mix of operations, strategy, and growth. And so that's how I discovered that opportunity. I went through the process by applying with a referral. So that's what I did. And I applied for a role at Uber and got the role. And I've been at Uber for about 3.5 years since. And I've also had 4 roles within my time at Uber. So a great thing about working for a global big tech company. I know there's a lot of buzz around startups, and there's definitely pros and cons of working at a startup versus a big tech company. But when you work at a big tech company, one of the nice things, especially a company like Uber, is that it's global, which means there's a lot of internal mobility opportunities. And so I've done this. Chief of staff is now my 4th role at Uber.
So I think you touched on like some really great tips. One is like you used your career center as much as you could, like you subscribed to all the features that they offered, including newsletter. Second is like you did that networking and then you asked for those referrals. And I feel like a lot of people don't do those 2 things. So and I can relate to it because that's something that I did as well. Like I used the career center aggressively at my school, as well as like my first contact at my current company was through a cold message, and we met for coffee chat, and then they ended up doing my referral and also kind of like guiding me in terms of the interview prep. So talking about the interview, like how was your interview experience? Do you have any tips for somebody who is preparing for an interview at Uber? What would you recommend them?
Yeah, of course. So interview processes have, I think, changed since recent years where there's this new phenomenon called the Great Resignation, and folks are trying to make their interview processes a bit shorter and more candidate friendly. But when I was interviewing for Uber 3.5 years ago, it was the opposite market where the job market, there was less jobs available than people that were trying to look for jobs. So the interview process was actually very long, I would say. My process started, as I mentioned, with me applying through a referral. The first step was a recruiter screen. And so the recruiter screen, I would say, is probably the easiest step of the interview. But in that step, I would always do your research on the company and come with specific reasons as to why you want to work at that company, not generic reasons of like, the company is growing really fast, I'm interested in the space. That's great and might be true, but you need very specific why Uber, for example. And my answer, happy to share, was at the time I was applying for a role at Uber Eats. And so I was able to say a few things. I was able to say that the food industry space, especially living in New York City, is super exciting and promising to me. I also was able to add that Uber Eats is like a startup within a larger company. And I really enjoy the possibility of growth within a smaller team, but within a larger global company, and a few other very specific reasons related to the company at hand. So that was the recruiter screen. It was 30 minutes. And it was just with a recruiter. That's also a great place to ask for what the process looks like, who you're going to be interviewing with, and next steps. So then the next step was a 30-minute screen with the hiring manager. So it was much more focused on why this role. And this is where I would give the advice that even if you don't have relevant experience, because I came from finance and that wasn't directly relevant to tech, try to craft your story to fit with the job description that you're going for. So I started to incorporate the same language that I saw in the Uber job description. The Uber job description talked about data-driven decision making, for example. That's a quote from the job description. And so in my story, I talked about how at JP Morgan, I was using data to drive decisions. Maybe the decisions weren't the same because it's finance, but I was trying to find parallels between the work I was doing to the new job that I was trying to go for. So that was the second step. Once I passed that, it was a final on-site interview.
Thanks for sharing that. And I'm sure like people who are either planning to interview, this advice is like very relevant to all of them. So thank you for sharing your experience, and thank you for going in the detail and like talking about the one thing that you said, like data driven, and how you integrated that into your answers. That was like the key, because like you need to show it, and you need to kind of like in the interview, you need to kind of like the things that they are looking for, you need to kind of be able to like exhibit it. So I think that's the key. So thank you for sharing that. So talking about Uber, like I love following you on Instagram. And one of the things that you're always sharing is like how beautiful that Uber office is. So I want to know like what are like some of your favorite Uber perks?
Yes, I have to say that while I don't think tech is only about the perks, but coming from in finance where there were no perks, I was lucky if I got like a free cookie on a Friday. Coming to big tech was a huge shock to me, and it was super exciting. So some of the perks of Uber specifically, and I'm sure it's consistent with some of the other big companies like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, etc. Is the first is our office is at the World Trade Center in New York City. So that is one of the most iconic buildings in New York City. It's on the around 50th floor. And so the office has 360 views of New York City from every angle, which is absolutely stunning. And it's an open desk arrangement, so you can kind of hop around wherever you want. So in the morning, I'll sit facing the Hudson River, and then in the afternoon, I'll sit facing Brooklyn and kind of just make my way around the views. That's the first thing that I would say is really great. The other thing is, of course, free food. So there's free lunch every day. It's like a huge make your own salad bar, as well as sandwiches and soups, and it changes daily. As well as a coffee and tea bar with oat milk, which I love. It's a new addition. And so it has all the milks of preference. Other perks include a meditation and napping room, which is great for taking a short break or prayer, or whatever you have to do. And I would say the one really cool perk is when you work at a company like Uber, we actually get Uber credits monthly. And so you have credits to spend on Uber Eats and Uber, and also an employee discount for Uber products, which is really great when you live in New York.
Which one would you say like your favorite? Like if you have to pick one, like all of these sound amazing. So like which one would you say like yours like your top number one?
I would say it's my top number one for sure would be the Uber credit. I actually think, and it's an interesting study that's done in neuroscience, again, that's my background, is that if I were, Sundas, to give you, say, an extra $300 a month, and that annualizes to $3,600 of salary, if I gave you that raise, the happiness that you would get from that raise is not equivalent to the happiness you would get from a gift card, for example, that you were to spend immediately, because the convenience that it brings to your life is actually more dramatic than the increase of $3,600, for example. And so I really enjoy the Uber credits because it encourages me to, treat myself very often with my favorite foods or not taking the subway. So that's, I think, one of my favorite perks. And the other one that I didn't mention, which isn't exactly a perk, but actually a benefit, is unlimited vacations.
Hold on. We need to take a pause here. So unlimited vacation. Tell me how many vacation days you took last year? Like, do you use unlimited vacation?
Last year, given the pandemic, I think it's a bad case study because there wasn't many places to go. So I definitely didn't take more time off than I say average. But 2 years ago, when I got married, I took a total of 7 weeks off throughout the year, which I loved. And what I loved about it was that I didn't have to account for it. I wasn't penny pinching days, right? Like if I had to take a day off to run an errand, or I had to take an afternoon off to do something for wedding planning, I wasn't counting by the second where I was when I had like a set number of vacation days. It really allowed for a greater quality of life and flexibility, especially pre-remote work. Remote work now can allow you to run your errands when you need, but pre-remote work, it was really great to be able to take time off and didn't have to feel like every day that I took off had to be accounted for because it was unlimited. I will say that the year I got married and took the 7 weeks off, I also did get promoted. And I'm not saying that to boast, but saying that to say that you can take time off excessively, not terribly, but you can take your time off and also do well at your company. What I did was I batched them. So I did 2 weeks in, for example, February, then I did 3 weeks for my wedding in July, then I did 2 weeks for my honeymoon in November. So it was so spread out that people honestly didn't even realize that in conglomeration it ended up being 7 weeks.
Yeah, no, that is super cool. Especially the part where you said that you took that time off and you still got promoted, because a lot of the time people think that like unlimited vacation means, like it's a meme out there too, right? Probably you've seen it.
Yeah.
Like unlimited vacation means like you can technically not take any time off. So
Hmm.
it's amazing to see that you actually did take the time off and it did not negatively affect your career trajectory and you actually got promoted. So you joined pre-IPO Uber and then did it IPO afterward?
Yes. So I joined in September of 2018, and we went, I believe, March of 2019 or around that time period. So I was there for about 6 to 8 months before the company went public.
Everybody talks about like how it's like such a good timing to join a company before pre-IPO,
Yeah.
and then when they go IPO, you're basically rich, pretty much. So,
Yeah. I
uh,
wouldn't say rich, but yes, it was definitely a great time to join Uber because even the difference between the equity packages that were being offered when I joined 6 months prior to IPO. And again, when I joined, I didn't know the company was going public. That's not information that you know, but you can make an educated
yeah.
guess based on how big the company is, general investor speculation, um, other series funding that they've done. If you want to talk about this stuff, feel free to reach out to me separately, but you can make some kind of guesses. And I had a feeling that Uber would go public in the next year was what I was thinking. And surely we did go public about 7 months after I joined. And the equity packages, just the difference between 7 months is huge because I know people who joined the company right after IPO, and the difference in equity package is so significant. And the main reason for that is when you join a company pre-IPO, there's a lot of luck that's involved with that because they will give you your equity package with some price point, usually called the strike price, but they don't have there's no guarantee that that price is going to actually come to fruition. You might, when you go public, have a lower price or a much higher price. So it's a risky business. But when you join a company post
Yeah.
IPO, they know exactly what they're worth, right? It's a public company. So your equity package is more steady, but there isn't much upside.
Okay, awesome, cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. So my last question for you. So you are chief of staff at Uber and you work with a lot of senior leadership. So I wanted to ask you specifically, since you have like so much exposure to the senior leadership and executive team, what are some qualities, what are some leadership qualities or any other qualities that you see in those leaders that are different from your everyday ICs?
That's a great question. I think so. I've been in this chief of staff role for about 6 months, and I came from an IC role, as I mentioned, a strategy and operations manager type of role. And the biggest difference about the chief of staff role is that the folks that I'm exposed to are executives, C levels, those kind of folks. And I would say there are three things that stand out from these executives in comparison to other folks that I interact with at the company. One is that they are acutely self-aware. So when I say this, I say that the executives that I'm surrounded by, they're very aware of their strengths, but equally aware of their weaknesses and blind spots. And they ask for help in those areas. So I find that really admirable because early in my career, especially, I was almost afraid to ask for help. I was afraid to look, quote, stupid in front of my colleagues. And so I didn't ask for help or even admit my weaknesses because I wanted to make sure that I was perceived well. But the leaders that I see in senior positions, they actually will be the first to say something like, hey, Sundas, I'm not very strong in the data side of things. Can you walk me through that? Or can I get some additional resources to help me understand this framework? They're so secure with their strengths and weaknesses that they're able to ask for help at the right times while also providing their unique value. So they know when they can add value and they will make sure to surface that in meetings so that you know that they're competent. The second characteristic that I will say is that the senior leaders are very inclined to giving credit to junior folks on the team. So good senior leaders are the ones that take the blame when something goes wrong on their team, but they also don't take the credit when something goes right on their team. And they share that with folks on their team because that leads to motivation as well as leads to the team well-being. And so I've really seen that folks will give opportunities to maybe ICs to present at leadership meetings instead of themselves because they want to highlight their team. And I think if you find people at the company like that, you should really try to work for them. Honestly, the biggest career investment that you can make is a strong mentor or a strong executive sponsor at your company, because despite the role that you're working on, it's really the people, especially at senior leadership positions, who can unlock things for you. And when you find a leader who shares credit but takes blame, I think that's really unique and helpful. And the last third thing that I would mention about senior leaders is that they don't take themselves too seriously. And when I say this is that they know a time and place for when they need to be serious and have their like work hat on, but they also are personable. They're human at the end of the day. They do a really good job being poised and sophisticated, you know, when they're talking to investors or big company presentations, but human, asking about your weekend when they're not.
That was beautiful. I'm gonna write all of those three down, and I'm gonna make sure that I embody them in my work as much as I can. One of the things that I am personally like trying to do more of is like giving credit where it's due.
Mm-hmm.
When I do that, even if I'm doing it for my peers, I feel like they want to work with me more because like
Yeah.
I'm giving them credit. So I think
Yeah.
it's like a great way to kind of like build that work relationship. So
It's definitely a great skill to have. I would balance it though with also taking self credit where it's important because, as you know, especially as a minority or a woman in the industry, you have
yeah,
to fight for your promotions. You have to be your own career champion. Not always are you going to just get a promotion because you did the best work. Unfortunately, that is not standard, I would say. It is a meritocracy, but it's also a bit of self advocacy that's required for you to know your worth and know
yeah,
your work. And so make sure to kind of balance it. And the credit should be given
yeah.
accurately in the sense of to yourself, but also to the colleagues and folks who have helped you in the project when it's cross-functional.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. Thank you so much, Maria. This was super, super helpful. I'm sure like people who are watching this got to learn a lot from your experience, not just from like school, like student perspective, but also people who are working in the industry. And I loved your answer about the senior leadership and what are the different personality traits and leadership traits that people have at the top that make them successful. So thank you so much for sharing that. If people want to connect with you, what is the best platform to find you?
Yes, I would love to connect if you're interested in breaking into tech or just general career lifestyle advice. Best way to find me is on Instagram. It's at Life with Mars. And you can DM me there and follow along. I will also be hopefully launching a YouTube channel in 2022. So stay plugged in my Instagram so you can get the latest. I also have a website and a newsletter, but Instagram's the best place to start, and then we can connect from there.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope this was helpful. If you liked what you heard, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more about data science, tech, career, lifestyle. And if you want to hear more from like amazing people in the industry like Maariya, who shared a lot of tips today. So I hope you're having a beautiful day. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good one. Bye.